Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Thanks for tuning in for another episode. Today I want to talk about something that I think is often misunderstood in the fishing world. One of the most popular phrases that we hear people talk about is to fish the windy side. Well, fishing the windy side definitely works in some situations, but I don't think what people realize is that actually goes into play for the days following the windy day. So there's not just the idea of fishing in the wind on the windy day. Yes, that does create some opportunities, but I would argue that the best fishing is actually on the same shorelines after the windy day. So the day or two after the windy day. And I'm going to tell you why I feel this way. But before I get into it, I do want to remind you guys, we're going to have our first live stream coming up for the members of the channel. So if you're not a member yet, hit the join button on the homepage. You've got different options at different membership levels. They both get you into the live streams and additional content. So check that out if you want to partake in the live stream. That'll be coming up here soon. Okay, guys. So most people will say, fish the windy side. Well, fishing the windy side isn't just as easy as going and fishing the windy side, right? Like going and sitting out in the wind. That's not exactly how it works. But there is definitely reasons why you want to fish the windy side. And I'm going to tell you why I think it's better to fish the windy side after you've either had several days of the same direction wind or one day after a really strong wind. And the reason for that is simple, right? If you've got wind blowing from one direction, it's pushing water into that far shoreline. So if you've got a west wind, it's pushing the west wind into the eastern shoreline of the lake. It's really important to know because what happens when you get that wind direction, you get that push of water, several things take place. First, you could potentially have warmer water if you're dealing with, say, the springtime period or a warm wind. You could have warm water pushed into a shoreline that may have had cooler water, and there in turn pushes warm water into that shoreline, and therefore that makes for more active fish. It could draw fish to it if the water temps are really cold normally, but you've got warmer water now on that shoreline. It can move the fish around. It even can work the other way. You could have a really warm shoreline. You know, down south, you get some shorelines that have 90-degree water on it. You get a strong wind that pushes deeper, cooler water into that shoreline where the shoreline temperature drops a little bit. That can draw fish to the bank. So it's not necessarily just a springtime thing. It's a year-round thing that can take place. But what a lot of people don't realize is when you have that strong wind, not only could you have temperature changes, you also will have increased current flow. So when the wind is blowing to that bank, it's pushing a volume of water, and that volume of water is creating current all over the lake. It doesn't have to necessarily be on the shoreline that's getting pounded by the wind. You may, on big lakes, what will happen a lot of times is you get water that is pushed into that bank, and what it does is it drops the water on the other end of the lake, but that creates a suction. So when the wind stops blowing and you shoreline that actually had more water on it settles out, you get a suction back the other way. Well, that's going to pull water from all over the lake. So you could have bays that were on the protected side of the lake that now has a flushing of water. It's not necessarily current like a river, but it's current from like a flushing of the system. It would be the same thing, if you put a cup into a bucket of water and push down on it, you're going to push water around in that bucket. That's just how it is. But that creates fishing opportunities that are really important for you. Places that don't normally have current, but then get current, can really turn on a good bite on the areas that you're generally looking for on a lake or a river that has current year-round. If you've got a point, or you've got some humps, or you've got some weed clumps, anywhere you get current that is pushing around objects creates really good high percentage places for fishing because that's where they go to set up to feed. It's pretty basic, but you got to recognize that this happens not just on rivers or on man-made lakes that have rivers flowing into them, but on the most natural lakes, whether you're down south in Florida or you're up north, up here in Wisconsin, you get current that happens on lakes from the wind direction. The next reason this is really important, so So going back to the current, just to finish that thought, the day, if you have a strong wind, a lot of times that lake doesn't settle out until the wind completely stops or lays down. So you may have a strong wind all one day, but you're still going to have a back flushing of current that's going to create opportunities for you on the next day when you didn't think there would be any current. So it's important to understand that. The next big thing has to do with the feeding opportunities that take place. Most people think, oh, it's because the bait fish get pushed into the shoreline, the bass follow the bait fish. Well, that is kind of what happens, but it's not really necessarily what happens. Generally, the reason that the bait fish are there is because what the bait fish feed on has been blown onto that shoreline. So your planktons and your different types of, sediment and things that are floating around in the water are being pushed to a shoreline. That is why the bait fish are following it, moving up to that shoreline. And that's why the bass are there. It creates really good opportunities. So it's important to understand it's a food chain thing, right? I mean, we know the shad are there, but the shad are there because they're feeding as well. Sometimes, yes, they get pushed by the wind, but the wind isn't necessarily pushing all the bait, all the bait in the lake onto that shoreline. A lot of it just has to do with feeding opportunities, and they go wherever the bait goes. So, you could be fishing a shoreline and it's full of shad the day after the wind blows, and then the wind switches or the wind just settles out, and that bait fish is going to disperse over time because the food that was blown into that shoreline that they're feeding on are not necessarily there anymore. The last important thing to understand is you get really good fishing opportunities even after that strong wind, because now you've got a shoreline that has been kind of stirred up, and you may have had clear water to begin with, but now you've got some off-colored water or you got some mud lines. Those will hang around for a little bit of time. And that's important because now if you were fishing, say, clear water, the fish are going to be not as wary of you, and they're going to be more in an aggressive mood up in that dirty water looking to feed. So you can power fish those areas, which allows you to cover more water, it allows you to be more aggressive. And generally what that means is you can put more fish in the boat. It's just something that a lot of times I think people very, very much misunderstand, is that fishing the windy side doesn't just apply to fishing the day that the wind is blowing. It applies to the day or two after the wind was blowing as well. That bank is going to be a good bank for more than just that time when the wind's blowing on it. In fact, I'll argue that it's better the second day after a strong wind. So what do you guys think? Have you seen similar things? If you have, throw it in the comment section. I'd love to hear from you. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. And thanks for watching, guys. Stay tuned. Another video coming out tomorrow.